This year, 2025, marks 8 years since I started teaching singing, and I've been thinking about how it all started. And I don't need to go way back to the beginning, to my birth on some Wednesday in May, and I probably don't need to mention my childhood hamsters, Caramel, Finty, and Millie Biscuit Dulcie Terry. She had a diva name. And looking back now, they were adorable, but absolutely crappy family pets. So I'll fast forward a bit, and perhaps you can walk that path with me for a while. Maybe you can take some time to reflect on your own journey as a singing teacher up to now. Or maybe you're actually considering taking a detour from the path you're currently on to become a singing teacher. Either way, I hope there is something here that feels relatable and maybe familiar. Maybe there's something here that brings a little bit of comfort to you. And maybe there is a spark of inspiration that comes from it that can help you bite the bullet to become a singing teacher like I did in 2017, sitting at the kitchen table with my husband next to me as I wrote a letter resigning from the position that I held as a coordinator at a local relocation company, a place that had both slowly brought death upon my soul and which also made me realize I had to listen much closer to what I really wanted. And that was a life in the creative field surrounded by artists and stories. Just to give you a little bit of context, I had always had the intention of performing professionally. And as a theatre kid does, I dreamt of being on the West End one day. When I was little, I attended drama classes. I didn't do any dance classes, and I didn't have any singing lessons until I was at college when I was about 16 or 17. And even then, they weren't really technically driven. Anyway, I went on to study musical theatre at university. But when I graduated, I still felt pretty clueless about what I was supposed to be doing. And as I tried to figure it all out, I got a job working in an office at Game HQ, getting shouted at daily down the phone by angry gamers whose copy of Call of Duty hadn't arrived. And even though I always acted quite professionally, I did struggle to find even a small part of me that gave a shit. I came to the decision that ordering Xboxes and repeating Royal Mail's policy for missing post was probably not going to get me auditions and where I thought I wanted to be. In episode 213 of this podcast, where I chatted with Estelle Idoko, we talked about finding a life of creativity, and we mentioned author Aime McNee. Aime has a book called We Need Your Art, and she also writes some fantastic Substacks. And there's one that she wrote at the beginning of the year called I Didn't Want a Job. And in that, she states, and I quote, "I didn't want to work in a publishing house, as a personal trainer, as a receptionist, as a waitress, in marketing, though I gave them all a shot. I scrolled through thousands of job listings, applying to hundreds of jobs, knowing it was not what I wanted to do. I couldn't believe that the rest of my life was going to mostly consist of doing labor for someone else. I couldn't believe no one else was making a fuss. Why was everyone so content to just accept these conditions? I wasn't afraid to work. In fact, I like working. But I was afraid to work in the wrong place and give my energy to the wrong thing. So, plot twist, after 8 months of working at Game HQ, I pulled my manager aside and gave her my resignation date. My parents were a bit concerned about what I was going to do, but my life didn't belong there, and I was 21, so I thought I'd work it out. In those few months where I didn't work, feeling shame when somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I had to croak back that I was an unemployed performer, I signed with an agent, and I started to get auditions. And that brings me to lesson number 1. Looking back now, as a singing teacher 8 years into her career, I have learned that I did not know nearly enough about my voice, navigating technical singing, how to navigate the musical theatre industry in general, or how to prepare for a professional audition. We've asked many guests on this podcast whether they think that the science of singing and the whys of technique should be taught to the singer. And it's understandable that most of the answers are, well, it depends on the individual. For this individual, I would have found it extremely helpful to understand even just some of the basic foundations of singing theory, just so I had some problem-solving tools in my back pocket. It wasn't really until after graduation in 2011 when I started getting my first ever targeted one-to-one singing lessons with a lovely coach, Nathan Lubbock Smith, did I feel I was really introduced to proper vocal technique that was tailored to me. And this is part of what drives me as a singing teacher now, helping singers have much more awareness about their own instrument, understanding how we might be able to help solve a challenge and the options available to do so, and helping them to understand musical theatre training and the industry that little bit more than I did. Of course, there is not an endless pit of money in the bank, and so I did find another temporary office job with a relocation company, the one I mentioned before, and that supported me in going to auditions, and at the last minute too. In 2013, I got my first big performing gig, singing as a lead vocalist on board a series of Aida cruise ships on a triple contract, taking me from February 2013 through to August 2014, doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. I had some of the best times of my life on those contracts, seeing the world, performing every night in different styles of shows, singing 6-part harmonies, wearing amazing costumes, although all of my costumes seemed to always have a hat. And with this pea head of mine, the dresses had to sew in these thick sausage-like bits of fabric into the hat so they would actually fit on my head. The people were amazing. The cultures I got to experience were amazing. I got to go to the bottom of the ocean. I spent Christmas in the Caribbean. The only thing I would say about the Caribbean was that even though I spent about 3 months there consistently, I only looked like I had a tan when I was stood either in a cave or when I was in my cabin with the lights off. I remember sitting out at one of the ports, I think it was in Dominica, where we had docked. And I was looking at the ship, and I remember sending a message to my mum saying that if this is the only professional performing I ever do, I consider myself to have made it because I had accomplished what I set out to do. But singing professionally didn't give me the feeling I imagined that it would. I was buzzing and there was a thrill and joy and I loved what I was doing. But something about it didn't feel right. And that was pretty devastating to realize, actually. I had listened and followed an intention that had been really quite potent for about 14 years. And I wouldn't change that for anything. But it wasn't the right place for me after all. I worried that I was letting my parents down, letting my agent down, that I was letting little me down. I did have some crippling audition nerves, but after I left the ships and I would get casting emails through from my agent, my first reaction wasn't excitement or anticipation. It was dread, feeling that this was not where my energy should be being put. So lesson number 2 for me is I didn't and I don't miss performing. I would go back to some of those moments on the ship contracts and do them all again 10 times over. There are some shows which I loved and could never get bored of, but I have no desire to be in front of an audience singing. Not anymore. I sing for myself at home. Maybe I'll share a little snippet, but I do it for me and I do it for my students in that I want to be able to build and maintain my voice for demonstration reasons, to truly understand what it is that I'm asking others to do. So it's much more about them and my own interest than it is now about being on stage. And I think it really contributes to who I am as a teacher. I can truly empathize with audition nerves, preparing for auditions, getting rejected from auditions, the dream of wanting to go and perform, knowing that now when I sit in a room where I'm on an audition panel, or I am assessing, or I am meeting someone for the first time, I know what it's like to be in that vulnerable position. And I'm pretty much in awe of them. So in 2014, I was back working at that relocation company that I worked at previously. And I stayed there after deciding to take a break from performing to keep some money rolling in, and as I tried to figure out what to do next. I joined BritishTheatre.com as a reviewer, which kept me hanging on to theatre by a thread, and I was doing some of my own writing too. I stayed in that job for 2.5 years, giving each day to an industry I had no interest in and cared even less about than not at all. And it made me a bit of a shell of who I'd been on the ships. Still, I kept telling myself, I'll leave when I have this amount of money in my account, or it's easy to leave in the new year, or I'll just see out this month. It seems like it's much easier to stay in a stable loop of unhappiness than it is to take a risk, even if that risk is one that can potentially make you much happier. Teaching singing had never really been something I had considered, to be honest with you, but it was suggested to me by my husband. But I was very aware that I didn't really know anything about how to help another person's voice and what was really going on. But then I saw a friend of mine from uni announce on social media that she was starting to train as a singing teacher, and I was filled with envy. And so I sent out an email to someone at work who I knew had an interest in music, and I asked if he knew of anyone who would want to have singing lessons, to which he replied, yes, me. And in February 2017, I handed in my notice at that relocation company and decided to try out as a singing teacher, not knowing if it was going to be the right thing either. Two things. At this point, I know it looks like I'm a bit of a quitter. And number two, I just want to say I have nothing against the relocation industry at all. My sister is in relocation and she is absolutely bossing it, but it's not right for me and I am not right for them. I appreciate also that a decision to just leave a job comes with the great support of people around you and the privilege of being in a financially viable position to do so. And that really was because of my husband, my then fiance. If our relationship had ended for some reason, I would be knee deep in the uh-oh zone. So I needed to march him down that aisle pretty pronto. Jokes, I jest. The first singing lesson I ever gave was in my living room with a simple keyboard and a flimsy music stand. And I think I charged it was under a tenner for sure. When I quickly realized that I needed help, I tried to soak up everything I could find, from YouTube videos by Justin Stoney, John Henny's boot camp. I probably listened to the Naked Vocalist podcast on loop. And of course, I enrolled on the BAST training 20-hour flagship course in 2017, which changed everything. Lesson 3 sort of has two parts. Part 1 is that you're going to come across many different contradicting opinions as you try to navigate being a singing teacher. And that's okay. It is confusing, it is frustrating, and it's something you must accept. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself bonkers. And that's because you're going to need to develop the skill to understand the premise of each rationale. As I read Training Contemporary Commercial Singers by Elizabeth Ann Benson, which I think I mentioned in my previous episode on my favorite current teaching resources, this point here is really made clear and driven home when Elizabeth talks about there being 53% of the interviewed pedagogues who define belt as a register, 21 who describe it as a voice quality, and 26% who define it as both. I have learned to just keep reading, keep absorbing, keep learning, and it will help to make informed decisions of our own. And part 2 of that is know who your people are. Being a one-to-one singing teacher can be a really lonely place at times, and you have no one to bounce ideas off. But the truth is you do, because you'll find your people, whether that's through a community like BAST, from a forum, from a course that you attend, or through colleagues that you meet at events or institutions that you work at. Reach out to them and ask your questions. And it might prompt a really fun discussion that just brings you and bonds you all together. I feel really lucky to have a real pool of people that I can reach out to for advice, thoughts, discussion, debate, and it feels like you're not quite alone anymore. I started advertising singing lessons in May of 2017. I made some flyers, I built a crappy website, I set up a Facebook group, and I joined a database of music teachers. When I started the BAST 20-hour course, it was in the September, and I was about to just start teaching at a dance school 2 days a week, teaching ages 8 to 18. This training at BAST could not have come at a better time, other than if it had happened 5 years previously. Inevitably, I faced things that I had no idea how to manage. Sometimes it would be a technical challenge I hadn't come across, something business related I didn't know what to do with, or just difficult conversations. And of course, those things happen now, which leads me to the next 2 lessons that I've learned. Number 4 is sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And it pains me because I've had issues with making mistakes my whole life. This feels a bit contradictory to a point I made just now, but it doesn't matter how much you learn. There are times when you feel like you still don't know enough, and we're still likely to come across things that don't respond to what we thought would be a no-brainer and end up just feeling stumped. And that's quite okay. It happens in probably every industry. The important thing is we continue to try and find the answer, or at least something that leads us closer to that goal. And lesson 5, breakthroughs aren't going to happen every single lesson. Whilst it would be a wonderful full body ego massage for there to be breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough each and every lesson, as a fellow singing teacher said to me recently, sometimes we just have to tread water for a while and let an idea simmer. Also, just because no earth-moving discovery was made doesn't mean big shifts weren't happening. I remember one distinct session where I thought I had done a really poor job. Then I got a message from them the following day, which was something along the lines of, yesterday's lesson was so great. I really started to get to grips with that particular thing we were working on. What we did really helped. And so sometimes success and progress is as silent as the seasons turning, which actually has now led me on to lesson 6. What you think the student took away from the session isn't necessarily what they took away from the session. There have been many times where I have done a roundup and asked the student to summarize what they're going to be taking away from the lesson. We might have been focusing on balanced onsets or vocal fold closure, belting, or whatever. And they reply with something that was just mentioned in passing at the beginning of the session about head posture. This has led me to ask for more feedback, check in with them a little bit more in the session, and that importance of teaching back and getting them to detail the practice that they are writing down for the week. Whilst running my own private tuition, I worked at that dance school for 5.5 years, and I helped prepare singers for festival performances and Dance World Cup. I was involved in 2 of the school's big productions. I helped singers with their drama school auditions, with some of them being offered places at Lanes, GSA, and Performers. It was a really rewarding few years with many opportunities offered to me that I'm eternally grateful for. Over this time, though, I had started to recognize who I was most suited to as a teacher and what I wanted my weekly schedule to look like. And I had a real drive for helping students with pre-profession training, drama school auditions, drama school training. And I had goals for working in higher education And a little bit of it was that I just didn't want to work Saturdays or weekends anymore. I'd been doing that since I was about 16, working at a department store on my weekends, and then working in a pub, and then working at a wedding venue. Thankfully, the relocation company, I didn't have to work weekends, which was lovely, but at Game I did. So weekends was done for me. Now I have been working as a one-to-one singing teacher at Italia Conti Drama School since 2023, giving training to musical theatre styles across the 3-year BA degree. I panel auditions and I mark assessments. And along with my private tuition, something has become clear to me. I might not be totally business savvy, and true, 8 years isn't really that long, but I'm quite good at creating a safe space for people to come into. It seems to be something that clients and students feed back to me most regularly, and it's another big thing which drives me as a teacher, to provide a space that is professional and informed, of course, but one which also has a little bit of humour and teamship, to create the safest environment for a student to enter, to be vulnerable, to offer their voice, their mistakes, their artistry, and without stepping on therapist territory, providing somewhere for them to store their outside baggage for a while. So here we are at 2025, and something is much clearer to me. Lesson number 8, I am much happier being self-employed and managing my own time. I mostly get to decide what days I work. But of course, being self-employed has its downfalls too. You don't really ever get to finish anything, and you could just work all the time. But I get to decide when I take a break. I get to decide if I want to take a 2-hour lunch and work through till 10 p.m. Not someone else, thank you very much. Yes, I run over in sessions. Yes, I probably spend a year and a half on tasks that should only take 45 minutes, and I'm not going to win any marketing awards anytime soon. But I like being the manager of my own schedule. I say that, but I'm also a bit of a structure girly. I like a routine, but I get to make that. I'm finally in a place where I care about the work that I'm involved in. It just so happens that I'm on the other side of the table to where I initially thought I'd be. So there we have it, my 8 lessons in 8 years. I didn't know enough about my voice when I was a performer, about the vocal technique side of things or the industry. I don't miss performing. There will be many contradicting opinions which all claim to be the right answer. Sometimes you're going to get it wrong. Breakthroughs aren't going to happen every single lesson. What you think the student took away from that lesson isn't necessarily what they're taking away. I'm pretty good at creating a safe space. And however hard it may be at times, I am much happier being self-employed and managing my own time. I have learned way more than I can mention, thanks to so many people, and I still have so much to learn. I'm only 8 years in. I still feel a bit like a baby, to be honest. If you're on this path already, I would love to hear what your big lessons have been so far. And if you're thinking about stepping onto the path of a singing teacher, I hope this episode has helped you know that it is possible to do, and it's possible to respond to the life that you want. And we can help you. You know where to find us, basttraining.com, or you can email me directly at alexa@basttraining.com. Thanks so much for being with me on this meander through my thoughts and my perhaps mild case of oversharing. Until next time. Hey you! If you're enjoying the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations and valuable insights from experts across the field of voice. By subscribing, it means we can continue to do that. You'll never miss an episode, and you'll be helping to spread the word to other singing teachers, vocal coaches, and overall voice nerds. So subscribe to this channel now and just watch your teaching grow. Ah.